What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Scratch Agency podcast, hosted by Scratch Agents for Scratch Agents. Today, we are super excited to have Captain Dave Jackson. Dave is from Hendersonville, Tennessee. He is the CEO and founder of IAOA, which is the Independent Agency Owners Alliance, and currently owns and operates a niche commercial agency, Risk Cannabis. During his 43 years of industry experience, Dave has started 5 Scratch agencies, so he's the perfect guest for this show. Dave, we appreciate you taking the time to jump on with Shawn and I. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So for people that may be listening right away here that haven't heard of IAOA, why don't you explain to them a little bit about what that group's about?
Yep. So 43 years total in the industry. Over 30 plus years I was on the captive side. And about 9 years ago, I became an independent agent. Shortly after that, because I've run agencies before, that wasn't the issue, but now I've got a different animal, right? Multiple carriers, all kinds of different questions. So I turned to Facebook and created a group because I'd had success in my local neighborhood doing that previous to being independent as a State Farm agent right near my neighborhood. So I started a Facebook group. I knew a handful of other independent agents. And so we started with like 3 or 4 or 5. It wasn't very many. And it didn't grow very much at all when it started. But I did it selfishly. I admit this to everyone. I did it selfishly, really to get my own questions answered, because I had different questions than I ever did before. I didn't have a district manager now like I did with State Farm, to call and answer basically any question they had. Sure, I could call a carrier rep, but they tend to give you biased answers. So I wanted to get answers from my peers. That was the whole purpose. It was pretty selfish on my part. So fast forward, today we have 8,524 members. They're 100% independent agency owners, principals, or partners in their agency, just like you and I. And so it's we use Facebook, social media as a group. So we're not an association per se, because we don't collect dues. If you belong on Facebook, it's free. We don't charge money. And it's a group of 8,000 plus peers where you can answer virtually anything about running your agency, whether it be employee related, compensation, carriers, market search, whatever it is that relates to your agency. You can get an answer. You can vouch usually within a few minutes.
Yeah.
You get an answer, and multiple answers usually. So that's how it all started. And along the way, we created a conference. We created a partnership program for vendors. And we're doing some other fun things here coming up real soon.
Dave, I'm curious, how long did it take? So you mentioned you started the group a while ago. How long did it take before you were like, wow, this thing grew a lot more than I expected?
So that's a great question. So I'm going to go into my phone here in my notes. I have an actual one of my notes that says what our membership milestones were, like when we hit how many members when, right? So I just keep it in my notes, right? Mm-hmm. So this year, March 22, we had 8,000 members. I'll go back to the beginning. Our start was January 29th of 14, so this coming January will be 9 years old. We didn't hit 1,000 members until November 11th of 15. So almost a year and 10 months just to get our first 1,000 members. Wow. And then we grew at about 1,000 a year, and so now we're at 8,500.
Wow.
So
what do you think
answer
caused
questions,
that?
When did I think it was a wow? When a year later, early in 15, when we decided to create a legal entity, and 3 partners and I created an LLC in Arizona where I lived at the time.
Gotcha. And was there something you guys changed that made it, you think, I don't want to use the word skyrocket, but it kind of sounds like, I guess once that entity was created, you guys were really able to, grow it a lot quicker.
Yeah, it was nothing we did. I've told everybody this. Stephen was at our conference last month. We've spent in 9 years $0 on promotion or marketing. 0. It's nice. All been word of mouth.
Very cool.
Referrals. It's an exclusive group. It's by invitation only, unless Facebook suggests it to you because you're in the industry maybe, and they say, hey, you may like this group to join. But it just basically turned out I had a need selfishly for myself to get some of my questions answered. And it turns out that there's a lot of other people, just like Steven, who felt the same way. And so they're like, this is awesome. I can get any. So the key is we only allow agency owners, right? So
Gotcha.
no staff at an agency, no carriers, no outside third-party vendors, only agency owners and only independents, no captive agents. That's it, exclusively. That's how I was, and that's how I thought I wanted to keep it, because I wanted to be able to ask, maybe I wanted to ask an employee question. Well, I don't want an employee in the group reading the question I'm asking about them. That would never work. So if you did that, people wouldn't ask the questions that they do today and get the advice that they're looking for. So it turns out that was the secret sauce that everybody wanted, and yeah, Northeast track all the way.
Awesome. That's
So
awesome.
I just want to pause the discussion quick and commend you, Dave, and Terry, and the whole team for the conference, 2 months ago at this point. But it was my first innovation. I was lucky enough to be chosen as a scholarship recipient, which is a cool program you can touch on, Dave, and
Sure.
we can go through that. But I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I received. Every single person so eager to help or answer questions or connect. And the coolest thing for me, and David just touched on it a little bit, but all the speakers and all the presenters are all our peers. You know, they've all been
Correct.
where we are or are in the same situation and do something really well. And you guys strategically pick people to talk on certain topics. And that's the coolest part. There's no, bias of different carrier reps or, to your point, of other people. It's agents that are in the trenches every day. And so what an incredible experience I had, and just hats off to you guys and the team for it helped that
glad
Nashville
to
is
hear
my
that.
favorite place. It helped that Nashville's my favorite place. So it was a good excuse to get down there, but
Yeah, for sure.
definitely looking forward to next year. So I just wanted to commend you guys on that. What we were
Thank
talking
you.
about the
We
conference.
appreciate your feedback, because that's what we hear a lot from first timers who attend our conference. So the conference history thing is, I didn't start this with any idea we were gonna hold a conference. About, I don't know, we weren't even at 1,000 members in our group, and somebody suggested, hey, let's have an in-person meeting. Obviously, this is back 7, 8 years ago, way before COVID. So you could have an in-person meeting. It turned out to be a Saturday workshop kind of thing. We call it a business seminar. 27 people showed up. Most of us were, since I was in Arizona, our group started out West Coast heavy. Now we have members all over the country, in every state, easily. But so we held it in Orange County, California. 27 people showed up. Did a one-day workshop, some group discussions, and some presentations. I did one. And so the next year we're like, let's hold an actual conference, and let's bring a trade show in, and have exhibitors there. And so now it's morphed into Nashville. We had 504 attendees. We had 121 exhibitors that brought 305 staff total. So the total, we had 809 in the house, plus a few extras with guests and such. So it's probably getting close to 900 people. So, and we have to consider, large size resorts with meeting conference centers versus a little meeting room for 27 people when we first started. So totally a different track that we had no idea on. We also have now a vendor partnership program where about, a year or two in, people are saying, hey, we should take advantage of our leverage. We now have a group here of 1,000 plus members. Let's get discounts, group discounts with this one or that one. And I said, sure, we can do that. So I started that program. That one's only about 5 years old. And so now we have like 160 vendor partners. They're all on our website, where our members can go to get information and contact about the services that they need for their agency. Sometimes it's market search, sometimes it's technology, sometimes it's, oh my gosh, you name it, E&O insurance. It could be anything that you need for your agency. We've got a vendor partner, and sometimes many of them for any such category.
Very interesting. Dave, I wanted to ask you, 5 agencies. I wanted to bring it back to that because when
Sure.
Steven actually told me, and then I saw your email, and I was like, I got to know more about this. And I saw
how
that.
does anybody start 5 agencies?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, you're probably the 1% of the 1%. I don't know how many people have done it before, if any, honestly. But so you started 5 agencies, and now you open Risk Cannabis, right? Which,
Right.
just I looked at your website. It seems like a very specific target, right? And it's just interesting to see how you kind of went from captive, quote unquote, to independent to like a very specific target, which I think is a very smart move. And something I'm trying to do myself is, almost be like a specialized generalist, right? Where you have your niche, but you also do a few different things. So I'm just curious, do you only write cannabis at that agency, cannabis risks, or
That's all we write.
that's all you write? Okay,
Yeah,
and what
for
made you decide
so
that?
anyone in the industry, anywhere from a farmer or a grower to a wholesaler, a retailer to a manufacturer. Yeah,
Very
anybody in the industry.
And what made you decide to go down that route?
Well, during my last 8 years prior to a year ago, I sold my retail agency in Arizona. I was a journalist, 85% personalized, 15% commercial. And I did a couple small niches. One of them was drone insurance. So I went and got a program for owners and operators of drones because that was an emerging market. Same thing with cannabis. It's an emerging market. It's definitely government controlled, so it's going to grow slower than something like aviation, which is still regulated, but not like cannabis is. So some states are very progressive. You can start with Colorado, and some are extremely not progressive whatsoever. And so, but I think eventually, kind of like lottery, they'll come along, and eventually, majority of them will offer it some sort, especially after it's been tried and true and shown that cannabis products can provide health benefits to a lot of different people in a lot of different age ranges for a lot of different reasons. So it just because it was an emerging market, was one that was new, and I wanted to learn something new and exciting, and so that had been on my radar for a while. So when I sold my retail agency, it was a perfect opportunity to jump into that. But so here's what I'm going to give it, the 60-second timeline. So I worked for AAA in Iowa, that's my home state, for 11 years. So they were a carrier. So a lot of people know them as a carrier in various states. They're morphed and a little different now than they used to be. But so I worked at the home office of an insurance company, the insurance part of it, not the motor club or the travel agency, but I worked in the insurance agent for 11 years. I left there and I became an Allstate agent in Iowa, and I did that for 6 years. Sold that agency back to the company because you had an economic interest. I was an exclusive. It's called an NEA, Neighborhood Exclusive Agent, where you're an independent contractor. You were not an employee. And then the reason why I sold that one back to the company because I relocated to Nebraska. So the first one was just because I wanted to get into the agency, and I knew somebody who was a manager with Allstate. So he talked me into the contract, and I went along with it. I was green and naive as anybody, working from a carrier side of things versus now on the agency side. It's a different risk. So that was the first one. So the second one was because I relocated. I started a second Allstate agency. So I had 2 agencies, one in Iowa, one in Nebraska. Then I had an opportunity to move to Arizona, so I sold that agency to an outside buyer. So I sold the 2 Allstaters, and then was out of insurance for just a little bit in Arizona to start with, but then I went back to State Farm. When you're with Allstate, you always consider yourself as playing on a JV team, because the state farmers around you are bigger, there's more of them, they have more market share, and they generally make more money. So they're considered the varsity. So I thought, what would I do if, I'm still a captive guy, so what would I do? I'd go talk to State Farm. So I did. And I started my agency with State Farm. They give you 1 year, give you 8 months of training, and then 1 year kind of like probationary period. And then if you cut the mustard, they give you a permanent contract, and off you go for life, as long as you want to. Came up on my 1 year contract, and they said, we don't think this is going to work out for you. I'm like, that's interesting. So I said, it took me about 48 hours, they said, you know what, I'm not going to let the man tell me again what I can or cannot do, so I'm going to become an independent. So that was my main reason to go independent, and I'm forced to start a new agency. It wasn't my call, it was theirs. But that's fine. I have no animosity against them. They're the largest carrier in the U.S., so, they do some things right. So, but it just wasn't for me. I was too much of a rebel, I admit. So I went independent. So that was my fourth one, 2 Allstates, a State Farm, finally a retail independent agency. And then I moved to Tennessee early this year after selling my retail agency in Arizona in December last year. So my fifth one was Risk Cannabis. And that was, so 2 of them were really because of, 3 of them were really because of relocating to a new state, to a new area. And that's how it happened.
Okay, so I think this would be a good question to ask you since you were in the captive space for quite some time and the indie space. For a new agent coming in, maybe they're thinking of going captive versus independent. I mean, listen, we could just go to the IAOA group and check out the millions of different answers about it. But in your opinion, what do you think the main difference is? Like, what advice would you give to somebody?
Yeah, I get that question a lot because I've consulted for a lot of younger agencies, their owners primarily. Independent's not for everyone. If you're the type of person that needs some guidance and you need hand-holding and you're not ready to, you've never been a true entrepreneur and you're just not ready or haven't been around that type of environment before, independent may not be for you, especially now because carrier contracts are getting more and more difficult to obtain, especially in a hard market like right now. So how are you going to convince them to do that? Well, you could go join an aggregator or a cluster and probably almost have no problem getting involved with them, and they'll give you all the carrier appointments you need. So that's how I actually went when I became an independent, because I had State Farm experience, but only for a year. And I did actually very, very good. I want to throw this back in there. I was number 4 in sales, ranked in sales my first year with State Farm in a district of 35.
Wow.
In auto and property. That just goes to tell you, if you don't do bank and health and life and all the other products, they won't let you stay around. So it's not about sales unless you're well-rounded in every category. Anyway, see, I don't hold any.
That's a good point.
But should they choose captive or I would talk to them. I'd ask some questions because the captive. A lot of people say, well, captive carriers give really good training and background. They give you a good base to start yourself as an agency. Maybe even financial assistance to start up. That might be a good place for certain people to be. But for a real true entrepreneur who doesn't want people they want to be independent, they don't want people telling them what they have to do, even though it's funny, carriers do tell you what they want you to do. They're going to put, premium requirements on you and all, production requirements, everything else, quotas, however you want to call it. And, if you don't cut the mustard, they have the right to pull your contract. So that can happen. It didn't happen to me, but it can happen, and I've seen it and heard it happen. So it depends on the individual, and I would ask them a series of questions to determine which path is right for them.
What would you attribute your success for as an independent agent, or as an agent in general? You said you were 4th in sales in the State Farm agency. Obviously, was very successful in that regard. For someone that maybe, I think Shawn and I talk about the mission of this podcast, and obviously the Scratch Agency podcast, we want to help people who are looking to take that jump and own their own future by, owning their own agency. But I think there's going to be some people that may listen to this that are producers as well, and they're that great second man and looking to take the next level in their producer journey. So from a producer standpoint of being that successful in sales in this industry, what would you attribute that to as far as, doing so well?
Yeah, I can sum it up in one word. Innovative. That'd be my one word to describe myself, because here I am. I'm 64 years old, almost 65, and I'm the founder of a Facebook group, a social media group that 8,000 plus peers have joined and followed along, right? Not because of me. It's not me. I don't answer all the questions in the group. That's done by everybody else, all 8,499 others. So it's not because of me, because I'm nothing special. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time and had a vision. And it turned out that I didn't realize it, but others had a vision when I created that group. They had the same vision. So I'll give you an example. When I was my first agency, I was an all-state agent in Iowa. I was the first NEA, Neighborhood Exclusive Agent. I was the first independent contractor. All the ones, they had just changed their contract. Everybody before me, there's about 50 agents in the state altogether. They were employees of the company. They were still employee agents. They called them NOAs, Neighborhood Office Agents. The company paid their rent, their Yellow Page ad, all their advertising. They paid it for everything. They were still, did you know, all-state agents used to be in the Sears stores? Because Sears owned them prior to 1988. So they had booths in the Sears stores right next door to the Husky boys jeans department. So that's how All-Staters started out. So then they moved to this NOA contract, moved them all out of the stores and out to offices in the neighborhoods. And then eventually they said, we're making everybody independent. So everybody is now, but through the transition phase, I was the first one in the state of Iowa to start with an NEA contract, independent agency. So I went to the first district meeting. It was split into two districts. I think there was probably 25 or 30 agents in my district. Go to the first meeting, and they're all like, what kind of fool are you? You cannot make it without your Yellow Page ad, your rent's not paid. You got to pay for all of this stuff on your own? How you think you're going to make it, dude? And I said, well, number one, I get paid about 2.5 times the commission you do. So it's a whole different structure. But they're guys who run a Yellow Page ad, sit in the office and wait for the phone to ring. That's how they did business. That's how Allstate built themselves for years and years and years. I'm not going to bash it, but I'm an independent agent. I got to go out and make the phone ring. So I did two things. Number one thing, this is pre-internet, right? This is in the 80s, so the internet is just coming out. You didn't have, online ads you could buy and do all the stuff you can do today. I did telemarketing. I hired telemarketers. I sat in my office every weeknight, Monday through Thursday, and we pounded the phones, and I made money. But because when you do that and you're willing to make the sacrifices, it's not easy. It's a hard go. But anything that's worth it is going to be, a challenge. It's not going to be handed to you. But so one of the things they did, once I became successful at Allstate, the district manager came to me today. He says, hey, we'd like you to test a pilot program. I said, tell me about it. He says, we have a list of everybody who gets involved in an accident with our own policyholders, right? The claimants. Now they have an accident on their record. Some of them are at fault. Some of them are not. But we'd like to give you a list of those people and say, hey, you were just involved in an accident with an Allstate insured. We want to know how that claim handling went for you on your end. And they asked me then to cross-sell that person over to Allstate. Nobody else would ever offer this in the state. This is a pilot program. I said, absolutely. I'll telemarket the crap out of it. And I did. And I just went from number 4 out of 50, or probably 14 out of 50 to number one. I was number one in the state for 5 years. So in sales. And that's because they trusted me to test a program like that. So then they offered it to somebody else on the other side of the state in the other district. And man, that just shot me through the roof because I was willing to do the hard work. So be innovative, be willing to look outside the box, and just go work your tail off. There's no major secrets in any industry, let alone ours.
Very true. What do you, Dave? What do you think is the biggest? Because you obviously talk to a lot of different agents, right? Just being a part of that large group you're in. What's the biggest mistake you think you see, for newer agents?
I have about 1,000 of them that rank number one. So if I could pull one of those out, Stephen might remember my presentation from last month at the conference. One of the things that I did because I was an all-stater to start with, and they did displayed advertising. I'm telling you, a full-page ad they shared, and everybody's little headshots was on there. If you're in this part of town, call them, blah, blah, blah. So I was in on that too because that's what you did. But I did a lot of other things that they didn't do. But one of the things I did try, and man, even today I laugh about it. I got a call from the local supermarket. Hey, we want to advertise you exclusively to every grocery customer that comes through our door, and we're going to put your face and your phone number right on the shopping cart, right in front of them where their baby sits in the shopping cart. And so you will be displayed. We'll have 30,000 impressions a month. And it's only going to cost you $999 a month.
What a deal.
How do you think that went for me?
I mean, back then it might have worked.
No, not even one.
They forgot to tell you that.
Phone call.
They forgot to tell you the baby sat on your ad. They put their baby on top of the ad.
Yeah. Or the produce or the bread sat right there because you don't want to put the light stuff, in the cart. So, never one phone call, and I think I did it for full year. So I spent $12,000 and got zero back.
That's an expensive lesson, but I'm sure you learned.
It's
from
a true story too. Yep.
Well,
So
it just
don't
shows
do
that
shopping carts. That was in my presentation. Don't do shopping carts. Today you can do golf carts. You can do display advertising on the side of anything, So.
Well, going back to the stories of you hammering the phones Monday through Thursday nights, it just shows like you said, it's not rocket science. It's hard work and consistency.
Right.
Show up and be consistent with it, and especially for the scratch agents that we're talking to. Sure, you can go out and get this system and that system and this and that, but at the end of the day, when you're starting your business, and Shawn and I talk about this a lot because we're in that boat right now, just get the business in, make the relationships, and sure, some of that stuff can definitely work in the future, but maybe the shopping cart isn't something you should look into today.
Yeah, and Dave, do you think there's something beneficial there to be more specialized? For instance, risk cannabis. Maybe you do offer some other stuff. I know you said you don't, but for somebody newer into the industry, do you think it's a good idea for them to be more niche and offer other products, or be more of a generalist? I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was a generalist, and so now I'm not. But I would say that, especially because I don't know if you guys been in the industry long enough. There are ebb and flow in this industry. Yeah. There'll be tides and waves, and sometimes 100%. You can ride the wave, and other times it's hard. Right now, it's hard. Agents right now are just fighting to keep the business that they have on the books. They're not even trying to grow, other than maybe building their book out and cross-selling. But it's not like 100% new business. So right now, starting scratch with nothing on the books, it's going to be a tough go. I can't think of a tougher time in my whole 43 years plus time. Tougher time to start an agency. So niche is probably a better way to go when it's hard times like now. It's much tougher to be a generalist because, when rates are going like they are, they're just going up crazy in all lines of business right now. That makes, the consumer go shop and look. Sure, so more people are looking, of course, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to find, something better from you or the agent next door. So I would say at least keep your options open to find a niche. And I always tell people who ask me that question, where do I begin? I say, find something that you're have a natural connection to. My wife at the time was doing day spa stuff, so I chose that as a niche and had kind of a inside lead source there because I knew a little bit I heard about it every night when she would come home. I'd hear about how that business works. Or maybe a hobby. Maybe you're into really something like boating, and you just want to get into major marine stuff, or aviation, or whatever it might be. That's one of the reasons why I got into drone insurance, because I love operating a drone. That was pretty cool. So something that so it's a short curve, right? A learning curve to understand the business because you're either in it or connected to it somehow. And so your learning curve isn't as long as it would be if you just pick something out of the blue that you don't know anything about. So pick something that you're familiar with, have an inside track to, so that number one, you'll have an interest, you have a passion for it, because you have to have that. And number two, you'll know where to go find the markets, the carriers that are going to write that kind of business for you, and you'll be able to build your own program possibly, and stay in a niche for a long time.
Yeah, and have a good business plan.
Absolutely. Well, no, there's no doubt that it is challenging out there. The rates are going up, but one great thing to help with that would be to join the IAOA group. So, Dave, if for people that are maybe learning about IAOA for the first time from listening to this podcast, where can they get involved? Let's talk about Chicago and the conference coming up next year, and some information on that.
Sure. First thing is go to IAOA.com. So everything's there. How to join our group. Information about last month's conference, just to get a review and a feel for what it's like. One of the things Steven said is we're unique about. I get requests every year, many requests. Hey, can I pay to speak from the stage? Usually from an exhibitor, right? And I'm like, no, that's really not how we work. Well, I'll pay more. No, that's really not how we work. If I change the format of current IOA members being the sole presenters, so it's all peer-to-peer, I think I probably have an assassination attempt on myself. So, because our members would not stand for it. They like the format. We started that way from the beginning. I don't see it changing. We do a survey after every conference, and every time people say, don't change. I don't want to hear a sales pitch by somebody who paid for the time. I don't want that. So I don't see that. We won't have a motivational speaker or a carrier CEO. I could bring all of those in. It'd be at a cost, so that increase your ticket price. Do you want that? No, not really. Because what they hear is, Stephen did, he heard 18 speakers in a 2-day time frame. And on Monday, he can take some of that information back, the parts that he chooses, and he can start implementing right on Monday and make his agency better. That's the beauty of it, and that's why it works so well. So we bring new speakers in, presenters in each year. We bring a few back. But usually it's a new topic and a new face, a new voice, and you get to learn even more from a different angle. And so that's what makes it work.
And so next year's in Chicago, right?
Yeah, next year Chicago. That'll be our 9th annual conference. It's at the Marriott Marquis. It's just south of downtown, not far from Grants Park and not far from the lake, if you know where that is. So you have access to the Miracle Mile and everything in the downtown area, which is fun. We got some activities we're planning, and this is a beautiful hotel. It's a high-rise, and it's just a really nice property. And there's some cool places all around, right close by, some cool restaurants and things that people enjoy when they're on their off time. So that's coming up next October, 5th, 6th, and 7th. That's also on our website at the Marquis Marriott in Chicago. When we're in Chicago, we will announce the following year in 2024 where that's going to be held. Have the contract here in my hand. We're getting ready to sign that. We'll announce where it's going to be, and that'll be our 10th anniversary. And I'm pretty sure about that same time we're going to cross the 10,000 member mark in our group.
It's awesome.
So
Very cool.
all about 10s in 2024.
Well,
Dave,
that's
I
great.
got to ask you before we let you go.
Sure.
Because you've been involved in a few different agencies and now this group. And you seem very motivated. What's your drive? What's your why?
That's a good thing. Good question. Early on, when I was a younger, 30 plus something, 20 something, when I got into the industry, it was about providing for my family. I had 2 kids. Today, it's just solely about my girlfriend. She has she's sitting right here laughing at me.
She's expensive.
She's got an appetite for diamonds and clothing and home decor and furniture.
Oh, that's great.
Cars and it's crazy. It's crazy, but
Love it.
that's not that far from the truth. I didn't say that.
Oh, man, that's great. Well, Dave, thank you very much.
We
for
all have a
joining us.
why, and almost always the why is family.
Yeah.
A loved one of some kind. Almost always. Yeah, there can be some other offshoots, but the majority of the time, that's what it is. So again, no big secret. There really isn't, whether it's in sales or our industry versus another industry.
Yeah.
Just go out, do the hard work that's required, and you'll be rewarded handsomely.
Love it.
All right. Well, Dave, thank you very much. We'll wrap this up. We appreciate
pleasure.
you joining us. Shawn, anything else before we wrap this up here?
No, that's it. Thanks, Dave. It was awesome to hear your story and finally get to connect with you, and hopefully I'll see you in Chicago next year.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, guys.
Well, everybody, that was another episode of the Scratch Agency podcast with Captain Dave Jackson from IAOA. Thank you for joining us. Do us a favor, like the show, share the show with your friends, and subscribe. And most importantly, remember to believe in yourself, dig down deep, and own your own future. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening or watching that episode of the Scratch Agency podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you next time. If you have any questions, you could reach out to myself or Steven on Instagram or LinkedIn, and we'll see you next week.